Hey friends, welcome. It is such a joy to have you here tonight. Whether you are winding down after a long day or simply resting your heart in a quiet place, I want you to feel completely at ease. Tonight, we begin a gentle and emotional journey through one of the most intimate and complex stories in the Bible. It is a story of love, rivalry, longing, and quiet strength. This is the story of Leah and Rachel, two sisters connected not only by blood but by their shared marriage to the same man. Their story is full of quiet moments, deep emotions, and the soft whispers of God's presence through generations. Together, we will explore their world with kindness and patience, in soft and flowing words. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love hearing from people all around the world who are listening together in peace. And if you enjoy these gentle stories, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep bringing you these calm, comforting Bible stories for rest and reflection. Now, let us take a deep breath. Let the day melt away and enter the still, ancient world of tents and quiet fields, where two sisters waited for love to find them. In the highlands of Haran, nestled among soft hills and olive trees, there lived a man named Laban. He was a herdsman, a keeper of sheep and goats, and a man of strong traditions. Laban had two daughters, each unique in her presence and personality. The elder daughter was Leah. Her eyes were gentle, large, and filled with softness. She was a quiet soul, thoughtful and tender. There was a depth in her gaze, as though she often pondered matters of the heart. She moved quietly through her days, often tending to her father's flocks or weaving under the shade of fig trees. The younger daughter was Rachel. She was radiant, lively, and full of laughter. Her beauty was spoken of across the region. Wherever she went, eyes followed her. She carried herself with grace, and yet she was not proud. She had the spirit of someone who had never been told no, and whose future seemed as bright as the rising Sunday. Though they were sisters, they could not have been more different. Leah was still and steady. Rachel was light and full of motion. And yet, each one held a longing deep within her, an unspoken desire to be loved, not just in passing, but fully and completely. Their home was simple, but not lacking. The tents of their father were spread wide across the field, with servants and shepherds coming and going. The sound of animals and the scent of warm bread often drifted through the air. In this quiet world, their lives continued as the seasons turned, waiting for change. One morning, not long after the spring rains had softened the earth, a visitor arrived. His name was Jacob. Jacob had traveled far, through dry wilderness and foreign lands. He was the son of Isaac and the grandson of Abraham. He came from Canaan, carrying with him the weight of a complicated past. He had fled his brother Esau after deceiving him, and was now seeking refuge and a future. He approached the well outside the city of Haran, the same well where shepherds gathered to water their flocks. It was there that he first saw Rachel. She came to the well with her sheep, her veil drawn lightly across her face. Jacob saw her and was struck, not just by her beauty, but by the grace with which she moved. the care with which she guided her flock. He offered to roll the stone from the well and water her sheep, though it was a task that usually required several men. She was surprised by his strength, and even more by his kind words. He introduced himself and told her he was Rebecca's son, her aunt's son. Her eyes widened with recognition, and she ran to tell her father that his nephew had arrived. Laban welcomed Jacob with joy. The family had not seen kin from Rebecca's side in many years, and he quickly offered Jacob a place to stay. For a month, Jacob worked alongside the family, helping with the herds and the household. But during this time, his heart had become full. He had fallen in love with Rachel. As the days passed, Jacob's feelings deepened. Rachel would smile when he approached, and they spoke often by the fields. Her laughter would lift his spirit, and he would find reasons to be near her. Leah, watching from a distance, noticed the bond growing between them. One evening, after the work had been done and the stars had begun to bloom in the sky, Jacob went to Laban. He said, "Let me work for you 7 years in exchange for your younger daughter Rachel." It was a bold and direct offer, but also one of honor. Jacob had no possessions to give, but he offered his time, his labor, and his heart. Laban agreed, though quietly he began to think of his own traditions. In their land it was not the custom for the younger daughter to marry before the elder, but he said nothing of this for now. So Jacob worked. Day after day, in the heat and in the cold, he served the house of Laban. He tended the flocks, repaired the tents, and kept watch over the sheep by night. His love for Rachel gave him strength, and the years passed like a few days in his heart. But not all hearts were light. Leah, the elder sister, watched from the edges. She saw the way Rachel and Jacob smiled at each other, the way Jacob waited for her by the well. And though Leah said nothing, a quiet ache grew within her. She knew she was not seen the same way. Her eyes, though soft and full of emotion, were not the ones Jacob sought. Still, she remained dutiful. She helped her mother. She baked and mended and cared for the younger children. She never spoke of her sadness. But at night, under the moon, she sometimes cried softly into her pillow, wishing that love might one day find her too. After 7 years, Jacob came to Laban and said, "Give me my wife. My time is complete." A great feast was prepared. Tents were filled with singing and food. Guests danced under the open sky. As was the custom, the bride was veiled from head to toe, and she was brought to Jacob in the night. But it was not Rachel. It was Leah. Laban had given his elder daughter in place of the younger, keeping the custom of the land. In the darkness, with only flickering lamps and the hush of night, Jacob did not know. And thus began the story of heartbreak and rivalry, of 2 sisters joined to one man, and of God's quiet presence in the deepest corners of sorrow and longing. The dawn light spilled softly over the hills near Haran, painting the sky with gentle hues of pink and gold. The world outside the tents was still and calm, as if nature itself were holding its breath. Within one tent, however, the air was filled with a quiet tension. Jacob stirred from his sleep, his mind still heavy with dreams of Rachel, the woman he loved. His heart had been full of hope and longing for so many years as he journeyed to this distant land. Now, here he was, so close to fulfilling that hope. Yet, as he opened his eyes and felt the presence beside him, a strange unease settled in. The figure next to him was veiled as custom demanded for a bride, but something felt different. The softness of her hands, the way she shifted in the dark, it was not quite what he had imagined. The night passed quietly. Jacob lay awake, turning over thoughts in his mind. How could this have happened? Would his dreams be fulfilled at last? When the morning sun rose, the veil was lifted, revealing a face he did not expect. It was Leah, the elder sister. For a moment, silence filled the tent. Leah looked at Jacob with eyes wide and hopeful, yet there was fear behind them. She had no idea how he would react to her presence. Jacob's heart felt heavy. Confusion and disappointment mixed with compassion. He knew now that Laban, her father, had deceived him by giving Leah in marriage instead of Rachel, the woman he had agreed to work for 7 years to marry. Jacob confronted Laban, seeking answers. The older man explained calmly that in their culture it was not customary to marry the younger daughter before the elder. He said that Jacob must complete the bridal week with Leah, and then he would receive Rachel as well if he worked for another 7 years. Though anger and frustration stirred inside him, Jacob was a man who respected customs and honor. He agreed to the arrangement, though his heart was torn. Leah, meanwhile, found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She longed for Jacob's love, for his full attention, but she was unsure if she would ever receive it. She had spent her days watching from the sidelines, loving quietly from afar. Now she was here, beside the man she wished to hold close. But Jacob's eyes and heart remained focused on Rachel. In the days that followed, Leah gave her best to her new husband. She prepared food with care, tended to the household, and sought to find small moments of connection with Jacob. When he was near, she would try to speak softly, to share her thoughts and dreams. Yet she often felt invisible, as though she lived in Rachel's shadow. Rachel, for her part, did not speak openly of her feelings. She remained calm and dignified, though her heart ached deeply. She watched as Leah took Jacob's hand, as Jacob shared his days with her. It was a quiet pain, hidden beneath her gentle smile. Jacob's love for Rachel was like a river flowing strong beneath the surface of this new reality. He was kind to Leah, showing her respect and fairness, but his passion belonged to Rachel alone. He treasured Rachel's laughter, the way she moved with lightness and grace. Yet he was torn between the two women. He understood the pain Leah felt, but he also felt bound by the promise he had made. In the stillness of many nights, Jacob would rise quietly and pray. He asked for wisdom to navigate this difficult path. He prayed for peace in his heart and for blessings upon both Leah and Rachel. The household of Laban continued to bustle with life. Shepherds called to their flocks in the fields. Women prepared meals and wove cloths. Children laughed and ran between tents. But beneath the surface of daily chores, emotions ran deep and silent. One evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and stars began to twinkle above, Leah found a quiet moment alone. She stepped outside the tent and felt the cool night air on her skin. The world was calm and still, and the only sound was the gentle rustling of olive branches in the breeze. Leah looked up at the sky, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She whispered a prayer to God, a quiet plea from her heart. She asked to be seen, to be loved, to be more than just the elder sister who had been given away in place of the younger. She longed for affection, for a place in Jacob's heart that was truly hers. Her voice was soft and filled with hope, a fragile thread reaching up into the vastness of the night. In those silent moments, something shifted. God's presence was near, comforting and gentle. Leah felt a quiet peace settle within her. Though her path was difficult, she was not forgotten. She was part of a story far greater than herself. The days turned into weeks. The seasons slowly changed. Leah continued to serve with quiet strength, finding small joys in the children of the household and in the simple tasks of daily life. Rachel's laughter would sometimes echo through the tents, and Jacob would smile in return, though his gaze would often meet Leah's with kindness and sorrow. In this delicate balance, the story of Leah and Rachel began to unfold, a story of rivalry and love, sorrow and hope, all woven together by the threads of fate and faith. The gentle sun rose once more over the hills of Haran, spilling warm light onto the tents and the grazing flocks. The day began with soft sounds, the low bleating of sheep, the rustle of olive leaves in the breeze, and the steady footsteps of those who tended the fields. Within one of these tents, the story of two sisters continued to unfold, a story woven with quiet hopes, deep sorrows, and the fragile threads of love. Leah awoke slowly, her eyes opening to the familiar shadows of her chamber. The warmth of the morning sun touched her face, but her heart carried a heaviness that had settled deeply within. She lay still for a moment, feeling the presence of Jacob beside her. His breathing was calm, steady, but his love was like a distant star, beautiful yet far away. For many nights Leah had prayed silently, asking God to bless her with love and acceptance. She yearned not just to be a wife in name, but to be truly seen and cherished by Jacob. Yet, each morning brought a new wave of quiet sadness, as Rachel's name echoed softly in Jacob's thoughts, as Rachel's laughter drifted through the tents. Rachel, on the other hand, carried her own burdens. Though she was the beloved, her joy was tinged with guilt and sorrow for her sister. She loved Jacob deeply, but her heart ached to see Leah's quiet suffering. Rachel had never imagined that their lives would become so tangled, so complicated. She wondered how love could be shared and divided, and whether it was possible for two sisters to share one man without pain. Despite her inner turmoil, Rachel maintained her grace and warmth. She moved through her days with a lightness that belied the weight in her heart. Her smile was a gift to those around her, and she tried to keep the household peaceful, even when tensions simmered quietly beneath the surface. Jacob, too, faced his own challenges. Though he had come to Haran with a plan and a hope for a new beginning, he found himself caught between two women he cared for in different ways. His love for Rachel was deep and passionate, Yet he could not ignore Leah's steady kindness and loyalty. He was a man bound by promises, culture, and honor, and he struggled to find balance and peace. In the evenings, when the world grew still and the stars appeared one by one in the sky, Jacob often sat alone by the fire, contemplating his situation. The flames flickered softly, casting shadows on his thoughtful face. He prayed for wisdom and patience, knowing that the path ahead would not be easy. Life in Laban's household continued with its rhythms and routines. The women rose early to prepare bread and meals. The shepherds led the sheep to graze in the fields, and children played beneath the shade of fig trees. Yet beneath this everyday life, emotions twisted quietly like roots beneath the soil. Leah and Rachel lived side by side, sharing the same home and the same husband, but their hearts moved in different directions. Leah's eyes often searched for a sign of affection from Jacob, a glance that might mean she was loved in return. Rachel, though she bore no ill will toward her sister, could not help but feel the tension that grew between them. One day, as the sun climbed high in the sky and the air shimmered with heat, Leah found herself walking alone among the olive trees. The breeze carried the scent of earth and grass, soothing her troubled spirit. She paused beneath a sturdy tree, its branches heavy with ripe olives, and looked out over the fields. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood, to simpler days when she and Rachel had played together beneath this very sky. Those memories brought a bittersweet smile to her lips. She loved her sister, but she longed for love that was her own, quiet and deep. As she sat beneath the tree, Leah whispered a prayer once more. Lord, see me. Know my heart. Bless me with children, that I may know the joy of motherhood and the love that comes with it. Her voice was soft and steady, filled with hope even in her sorrow. In those days, children were not only blessings, but a sign of favor and love. To bear sons was to secure one's place in the family and in the world. Leah understood this deeply, and her prayers were filled with a yearning to build a family, to be a mother to Jacob's children. Not long after, Leah's prayers were answered. She gave birth to a son, whom she named Reuben, meaning, "Behold, a son." Her heart overflowed with joy, and she felt at last a measure of the love and acceptance she had sought. Jacob, too, was moved by the birth of his son. Though his love for Rachel remained strong, he could not deny the happiness that came with the arrival of Reuben. He treated Leah with respect and kindness, recognizing the blessing she had received. Rachel, watching from the sidelines, felt a complex mix of emotions. She was happy for Leah, but could not ignore her own longing. Days passed with Leah bearing children, while Rachel remained without. Her heart ached quietly, and she wondered what her future held. Yet, Rachel's faith remained strong. She prayed with a hopeful spirit, trusting that God's timing was perfect. She found comfort in the gentle moments with Jacob, in the soft words they exchanged, and in the stillness of the night when all worries seemed to fade. As the seasons continued their cycle, the family grew. Leah bore more sons, each a gift and a promise. Their names carried meanings of hope, strength, and blessing. Simeon, Levi, Judah, and others. Each child was a new chapter in Leah's story, a testament to her quiet strength and faith. Jacob's household became fuller, the tents alive with children's laughter and the gentle chaos of family life. Yet beneath this growing family was a delicate balance, a dance of love and rivalry that shaped each day. The story of Leah and Rachel is not just about conflict, but about the many ways love is expressed and experienced. It is about the strength found in waiting, the courage in praying, and the hope that shines even in the darkest moments. For Leah, love came through motherhood and the blessing of children. For Rachel, love was a promise held close in her heart, a hope that one day she too would know the joy of motherhood. For Jacob, love was a journey of learning, patience, and faith. He was a man trying to hold two hearts with care, to honor both sisters with respect and kindness. In the quiet of the night, as the family rested and the stars watched silently overhead, the story of Leah and Rachel whispered on. It was a story of sisters, of love, and of the deep, gentle presence of God in every step of their lives. The days grew longer and warmer in the land of Haran. The soft wind carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth across the hills. Life in Laban's household moved with steady rhythms, the steady bleating of sheep, the gentle chatter of women at work, the occasional laughter of children playing beneath the fig trees. Yet beneath the surface of daily life, a quiet longing settled deep within Rachel's heart. Rachel awoke each morning with a hope that burned softly inside her, a hope for a child of her own, a child who would bring joy and a lasting bond to her and Jacob's life. She loved Jacob with all her heart, yet the absence of children was a quiet ache she could not ignore. Each time she looked upon Leah's growing family, a gentle sadness brushed across her soul. Though Rachel kept her feelings closely guarded, those who looked carefully could see the softness in her eyes, a mixture of longing and faith. She had learned to pray in the stillness of night, whispering words to God that came from the depths of her soul. She asked for patience and strength, trusting that God's timing was perfect, even when it felt slow and uncertain. The household was full of activity as always, but Rachel often found moments to be alone, to walk quietly through the olive groves or sit beneath the shade of a fig tree. In those moments, she allowed her heart to breathe, to dream, and to find peace amidst her longing. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and painted the sky with soft oranges and purples, Rachel wandered to a small stream nearby. The water flowed gently over smooth stones, reflecting the colors of the setting sunday. She knelt by the bank and cupped the cool water in her hands, drinking deeply and letting the peacefulness fill her. As she gazed into the flowing stream, Rachel thought about the journey that had brought her here from her childhood home to this land of strangers. From the laughter of youth to the complicated life she now shared with Leah and Jacob. She wondered what the future held for her and for the family growing beneath Laban's tents. Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Jacob approaching, his face calm and kind as always. He knelt beside her and took her hand gently in his. "Rachel," he said softly, "I know these days are hard for you. I see your heart even when you do not speak. I want you to know that I love you deeply and I am grateful for you every day." Rachel smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Jacob. Your words bring comfort. I trust in God's plan, even when my heart is heavy." Together, they sat by the stream in silence, letting the peaceful sounds of water and evening birdsong soothe their souls. Back at the tents, Leah's family continued to grow. Each new child brought joy and hope, and Leah's faith deepened with every birth. She found strength in motherhood and purpose in caring for her children and the household. Though she wished for Jacob's love beyond duty, she was grateful for the blessings she had received. The children played together in the dusty courtyards, their laughter weaving through the tents like a gentle song. They chased each other under the wide sky, their small feet stirring the earth, their voices full of life and hope. Leah watched them with a tender heart. Her eyes shone with pride and love. Yet sometimes she caught herself wondering how different things might have been. She longed for a love that was given freely, without the shadow of duty or expectation. Jacob continued to navigate his complex relationships with care. He sought to honor both Leah and Rachel with kindness and fairness. He knew the path he walked was difficult, but he held on to hope that love, in its many forms, could grow and heal. One evening, after a long day tending to the flocks, Jacob sat with Laban under the stars. They spoke quietly about the future, about promises and family. Laban reminded Jacob of the agreement for another 7 years of service, a reminder that Jacob's time in Haran was not yet complete. Jacob listened thoughtfully, but did not speak of his feelings for Leah and Rachel. The responsibilities he carried were many, and he knew patience was essential. As the months passed, Rachel's prayers were answered in a way she had not expected. She gave birth to a son, whom she named Joseph, meaning God will add. His arrival was a cause for celebration, a joyful moment that softened the tensions within the household. Jacob's heart was filled with gratitude and love. Joseph was a bright light in their lives, a symbol of hope and blessing. Rachel held her son close, feeling the deep bond of motherhood she had longed for. Though Rachel was happy, she never forgot Leah or the struggles her sister had endured. The sisters shared moments of tenderness and understanding, a quiet peace growing between them despite the challenges of their situation. In the gentle embrace of the night, the family settled beneath the stars. The children slept peacefully, their breaths soft and even. Leah and Rachel, though different in many ways, shared a bond forged by love, hardship, and faith. Jacob looked upon them both with gratitude. He knew the road ahead was long and winding, but he believed that through patience, kindness, and trust in God, their story would continue to unfold with grace. The seasons moved gently through the hills and valleys of Haran, weaving their quiet rhythms into the lives of Leah, Rachel, Jacob, and all who dwelled beneath Laban's wide tents. The early morning light stretched across the fields, waking the birds and stirring the olive trees with soft whispers of wind. Life, in its steady way, carried forward, filled with blessings, challenges, and the deep mysteries of the heart. Leah's family grew steadily with the arrival of each new child. After Reuben, her firstborn, came Simeon, then Levi and Judah. Each son was a tender gift and a source of quiet joy. Leah's face would soften with pride as she watched them play beneath the shade of trees, their laughter brightening the dusty courtyard. Their small feet left impressions on the earth, just as their presence left a lasting mark on her heart. Though motherhood was a blessing, Leah's longing for Jacob's love remained a tender ache. She treasured each moment spent caring for her children and serving her household, yet the place she sought in Jacob's heart often seemed just beyond reach. Her eyes, filled with hope and sometimes sadness, often sought him in the busy days, searching for a glance or a word of affection that would mean she was more than just a wife by duty. Rachel, too, found her life transformed in the arrival of her son Joseph. His birth brought a new light to the household, a bright thread of hope woven through the fabric of daily life. Rachel held him close, feeling the deep bond of mother and child blossom within her. She saw in Joseph the promise of the future, the continuation of a legacy that stretched back to Abraham and beyond. Though Rachel rejoiced in motherhood, she never forgot her sister. Their shared experiences, though marked by rivalry and complicated love, had forged a connection that went deeper than circumstance. Rachel's heart softened toward Leah, and moments of quiet understanding passed between them. In those moments, the rivalry that had once seemed so sharp melted into something more gentle, a sisterly bond strengthened by shared trials and faith. Jacob's life was filled with the responsibilities of a growing family. He cared for the flocks that roamed the fields, managed the household's daily affairs, and sought to balance the needs of Leah, Rachel, and their children. His heart was full, but also heavy. The love he felt for Rachel was deep and passionate, yet he also grew to respect and appreciate Leah's steady presence and the strength she showed in the face of hardship. Despite the challenges, Jacob approached his life with patience and humility. He often rose early to tend to the flocks before the heat of the day, walking through fields of green and gold as the sun painted the sky. At night he would sit quietly by the fire, the flames casting soft shadows on his thoughtful face, and pray for wisdom to guide his family and for peace to settle in his heart. The household itself was alive with the sounds of children's laughter, the low murmur of conversations, and the steady work of daily life. Women wove cloth and baked bread, tending to the needs of the family. Men guided the sheep to fresh pastures and repaired the tents. The aroma of cooking filled the air, mingling with the scent of wild herbs and earth. In this bustling life, moments of quiet reflection were precious. Leah and Rachel each found their own ways to connect with God and seek strength. Leah, often alone beneath the stars, would whisper prayers for love and acceptance. Rachel, too, would sit by the stream or under a tree, her heart open to the gentle whisper of hope. One day, as Leah watched her children playing under the warm sun, she felt a quiet stirring within her, a mix of gratitude and longing. She marveled at the blessings she had received, yet she knew there was more to come. Her heart whispered prayers for peace between her and her sister, for harmony in the home, and for love to fill every corner of their lives. Rachel, too, found herself drawn toward forgiveness and understanding. She saw Leah not just as a rival, but as a woman who had carried burdens and hopes much like her own. In this realization, a new tenderness grew, a sisterly love that transcended jealousy and pain. Jacob sensed this subtle shift in the household. The tensions that once simmered beneath the surface seemed to soften, replaced by moments of kindness and shared joy. He treasured these moments and sought to nurture them, knowing that family was both fragile and strong. Yet, as the family grew, so did the complexity of their lives. The responsibilities multiplied, and the challenges of love and loyalty required constant care. Jacob continued to work faithfully, knowing that the future depended on the choices made in these quiet days. In the evenings, as the sun set behind the hills and the sky deepened into shades of blue and purple, the family would gather beneath the stars. Children would rest, their breaths soft and even. Leah and Rachel would sit quietly, sometimes speaking in gentle tones, sharing stories or simply enjoying the peaceful night. Jacob would look upon them with a heart full of gratitude and hope. He knew that their journey was far from over, but he believed that through faith, patience, and love, their story would unfold with grace and blessing. The story of Leah and Rachel is one of many layers of love and rivalry, faith and patience, sorrow and joy. It teaches us that life's deepest challenges can also be sources of growth, and that even in complicated situations, love can take many forms. For Leah, love was expressed through motherhood and quiet strength. For Rachel, it was a hope held close in her heart, patiently waiting for the blessings to come. For Jacob, it was a journey of learning to hold two hearts with care and kindness. As the stars twinkled softly overhead and the night wrapped the world in its gentle embrace, the family rested. Their hearts were woven together by ties of blood, faith, and love. The story would continue, unfolding slowly, filled with lessons and blessings for all who listened. The gentle breeze whispered through the olive trees as another day dawned softly over the hills of Haran. The sky was painted with the pale colors of early morning, and the world seemed wrapped in a peaceful quietness that invited reflection and rest. Beneath the wide tents of Laban's household, life moved slowly but steadily, filled with small joys and lingering hopes. Leah's heart was full, though often heavy with thoughts that moved beneath the surface. She watched her children grow strong and healthy, their laughter a balm for her soul. Each son was a precious gift, and she named them with care names filled with meaning, hope, and prayer. After Judah came Issachar and Zebulun, and then a daughter, Dinah, who brought new light and softness to the family. Motherhood was a refuge for Leah, a place where love took root and blossomed despite the complexities around her. In the quiet moments, she found comfort in caring for her children, teaching them about the land and telling them stories of their ancestors. Yet, in her heart, she longed for a deeper love from Jacob, a love that would not fade with time or circumstance. Rachel, meanwhile, faced her own journey of faith and patience. Though Joseph, her beloved son, was a source of great joy, the desire for more children lingered within her. She watched Leah's growing family with mixed feelings, a combination of happiness for her sister and a quiet yearning of her own. In her prayers, Rachel spoke honestly to God. She asked for strength to accept what was, courage to face the days ahead, and hope that her family would grow. Her faith was steadfast, even when her heart felt the weight of waiting. Rachel's love for Jacob remained deep and unwavering. She cherished the moments they shared, the soft words exchanged beneath the stars, and the gentle touch of his hand. Though their life together was not without its challenges, their bond was a source of comfort and strength. Jacob moved through his days with care, mindful of the needs of both Leah and Rachel and their children. His love for Rachel was clear and strong, yet he treated Leah with kindness and respect, recognizing the blessings she had brought into his life. He knew that the story unfolding before him was far from simple, but he trusted in God's plan and sought to walk with patience and humility. The household bustled with life. Children's voices echoed through the tents, blending with the soft bleating of sheep and the murmur of women working. Meals were prepared with care, and evenings were often spent sitting by the fire, sharing stories and songs beneath the vast sky. One afternoon, Leah found a moment to herself beneath a wide fig tree. The sun warmed her face, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves above. She looked out across the fields where her children played, their laughter ringing clear and bright. In that quiet space, Leah allowed herself to feel the full range of her emotions, the joy of motherhood, the sorrow of longing, and the hope for peace. She whispered a prayer, asking God to continue to guide her family, to bless her children, and to bring harmony to her home. Her voice was soft but filled with faith. She trusted that, despite the challenges and complexities, love would find its way into every heart. Rachel, too, sought moments of quiet reflection. She would often walk to the nearby stream where the water flowed cool and clear over smooth stones. There, she found a place to breathe and to listen to the gentle sounds of nature. As she sat by the water's edge, Rachel thought about the future and the legacy she hoped to leave for her children. She dreamed of a family filled with love and peace, where every member would know kindness and acceptance. Though the path had not been easy, Rachel held tightly to hope. She believed that God's timing was perfect and that blessings would come in their own time. Jacob's responsibilities grew as the family expanded. He tended the flocks with care, leading them to fresh pastures and clean water. He managed the household's needs and sought to maintain peace between Leah and Rachel. His heart was full, but often weighed with the complexities of love divided. In the quiet evenings, Jacob would pray for wisdom. He asked God to help him be a good husband and father, to guide his family with fairness and grace, and to bring healing where there was pain. Though the days were sometimes long and challenging, Jacob held on to faith. He believed that through patience and kindness, their story would continue to unfold with blessings. The seasons turned slowly, bringing changes to the land and to the lives of those who lived there. The hills of Haran remained steady and strong, witness to the unfolding story of Leah, Rachel, and Jacob. The family gathered often beneath the open sky, sharing meals and stories, finding comfort in one another's presence. The children grew, their footsteps light and sure on the earth. their voices weaving through the tents like a gentle song. Leah and Rachel, though different in many ways, shared a bond that deepened with time. Their rivalry softened into sisterly love, born of shared trials and faith. They supported one another in quiet moments, finding strength in their connection. Jacob looked upon his family with gratitude. He knew that life's path was not always smooth, but he trusted in the enduring power of love and faith. He believed that their journey, though filled with challenges, was part of a greater plan. As night fell and stars blanketed the sky, the family rested. Their hearts were intertwined, held together by bonds of blood, hope, and divine grace. The warm sun rose again over the hills of Haran, spreading golden light across the tents and fields where Jacob's family lived. The world awoke slowly, with birdsong and the soft rustling of olive branches in the morning breeze. Beneath this peaceful sky, Leah, Rachel, and Jacob faced the days with quiet courage and gentle hearts. Leah moved through her morning chores with practiced hands, tending to the animals and preparing food for the family. Though her body was strong and capable, her heart sometimes carried a quiet ache. She loved her children dearly and found comfort in their presence, but the longing for Jacob's deeper affection still lingered softly within her. She understood that love could take many forms, and that patience was a virtue to hold close. In the stillness of early morning, Leah would whisper prayers, asking God for strength, peace, and the blessing of continued faith. These moments of solitude were precious, like small wells of calm in the busy rhythms of life. Rachel, too, began each day wrapped in thought and prayer. Her love for Jacob remained steady and strong, yet she carried the weight of waiting with grace. Though she had Joseph, her beloved son, her heart still hoped for more children and for the fullness of family she had dreamed of since youth. In the quiet spaces of the household, Rachel found solace in small acts of kindness, helping Leah with the younger children, sharing gentle words with her sons, and tending the household with care. Her heart was tender and open, a wellspring of love, even in times of difficulty. Though the sisters' relationship had been marked by rivalry, over time it softened into something deeper and more understanding. They began to share quiet moments of companionship, recognizing the unique burdens each carried and the faith that bound them together. Jacob's days were filled with the steady work of shepherding and managing his family's affairs. His love for Rachel was well known and deep, yet he had grown to appreciate Leah's unwavering strength and kindness. He sought to honor both women with fairness, knowing that his responsibilities were complex and often delicate. At night, Jacob would sit by the fire beneath the stars, reflecting on his journey and praying for guidance. He asked for wisdom to be a good husband and father, for peace to calm the tensions within his home, and for blessings to continue upon his family. The flickering flames cast soft shadows on his face as he listened to the quiet sounds of the night, the gentle breathing of his children, the distant calls of animals, and the whisper of the wind through the trees. In those moments, Jacob felt the presence of God close and comforting. The children grew quickly, their laughter filling the tents and courtyards with life. Leah's sons played together under the sun, their steps light and sure on the earth. Rachel's Joseph grew strong and curious, a bright spark in the family. Leah often watched the children with a mixture of pride and longing. Each child was a blessing, a sign of God's favor, but her heart still yearned for Jacob's full love. Yet she found peace in motherhood and in the hope that her prayers might be answered in time. Rachel, seeing Leah's quiet longing, reached out with gentle kindness. The sisters shared moments beneath the shade of trees, speaking softly of their dreams and fears. Though life had placed them in a complicated situation, they sought to support one another with grace and love. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the fields, Leah sat alone by a small stream. The water flowed gently over smooth stones, reflecting the deep blue of the sky above. She dipped her fingers into the cool water, letting its calmness soothe her restless spirit. Leah thought about the years that had passed, the joys and sorrows, the blessings and challenges. She remembered the day she had first met Jacob, the hope she carried, and the unexpected turns their lives had taken. Through it all, her faith had remained strong. She whispered a prayer of gratitude and trust, asking God to continue guiding her steps and to fill her heart with peace. Though the journey was difficult, Leah believed in the power of patience and love to heal and transform. Rachel, too, found quiet moments by the stream. She often brought Joseph with her, watching him play near the water's edge as she prayed. Her heart was full of hope for her family's future and for the blessings yet to come. Though Rachel faced her own struggles, she held tightly to faith. She trusted that God's timing was perfect and that the family's story was unfolding exactly as it should. Her love for Jacob and her children was a light that carried her through the days. Jacob's life was a balance of work, prayer, and family. He continued to serve God faithfully, seeking to be a good husband and father. His love for Rachel was strong, but he grew to respect and honor Leah's steady presence and the strength she showed in the face of hardship. The family's story was one of patience, faith, and the quiet unfolding of love in many forms. It was a reminder that even in complex situations, God's blessings could be found and cherished. As night fell and the stars appeared one by one, the household settled into peaceful rest. Children slept soundly, their breaths soft and even. Leah and Rachel shared a quiet moment beneath the sky, their hearts connected by the bond of sisterhood and faith. Jacob looked upon them with gratitude and hope. Though the road ahead was not without challenges, he believed that through love and patience, their family would continue to grow in grace. The soft light of dawn filtered through the olive branches, casting gentle patterns on the earth. The world awakened slowly, wrapped in a quiet calm that invited reflection and peace. Beneath the tents of Haran, the story of Leah, Rachel, and Jacob continued to unfold, marked by quiet strength, growing faith, and the tender work of forgiveness. Leah rose early, her heart carrying the mixed feelings of a woman who had known both sorrow and blessing. As she moved through her morning tasks, feeding the animals, preparing bread, and caring for her children, her thoughts often drifted to the past and the journey that had brought her here. Though the path had been difficult, Leah had found grace in patience and faith. The longing she once felt so sharply had softened into a quiet hope. She was learning to see love in many forms, not only in the gaze of a husband, but also in the joy of motherhood and the support of her sister. Rachel, too, embraced this journey of healing. Her heart, once heavy with longing and rivalry, had begun to open toward understanding. She sought to bridge the gap between herself and Leah with kindness and gentle words. Their shared experiences as sisters, wives, and mothers had created a bond that grew stronger each day. In the peaceful moments beneath the stars, Rachel and Leah would sometimes sit together, speaking softly of their hopes and fears. These conversations were filled with tenderness and humility, a quiet forgiveness that healed old wounds and fostered sisterly love. Jacob, witnessing this change, felt a deep sense of gratitude. The love he had for Rachel remained strong, but he also cherished the growing peace between the two women who shared his life. He knew that family was not always simple, but he believed that through patience, kindness, and faith, their hearts could find harmony. His days were filled with work and prayer. Tending to the flocks, managing the household, and caring for his children kept him busy, yet he always found moments to seek God's guidance. He prayed for wisdom to lead his family with fairness, for strength to face the challenges of love divided, and for peace to dwell in their home. The children played freely in the warm sunlight, their laughter weaving through the tents like a gentle melody. Leah's sons and Rachel's Joseph grew side by side, their bonds forming naturally as they shared the days and nights. Their innocence and joy were a reminder of the blessings present even in complicated circumstances. Leah found joy in teaching her children about their heritage and faith. She told them stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's own journey, passing down lessons of trust in God and the power of hope. Rachel, too, shared these stories with Joseph, nurturing his curiosity and spirit. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Leah walked to a quiet place by the brook. The water moved gently over smooth stones, reflecting the soft colors of evening. She knelt by the edge and let her fingers trail in the cool flow, feeling the calmness seep into her soul. Leah's thoughts turned to forgiveness, the forgiveness she was learning to offer to Rachel, to Jacob, and most of all to herself. She realized that holding on to pain only weighed her down, while releasing it opened the door to healing. She whispered a prayer of thanks and asked God to continue guiding her heart toward peace and love. In that moment, Leah felt a lightness, as if a burden had been lifted, leaving space for hope to grow. Rachel, walking nearby with Joseph, saw Leah by the brook and joined her quietly. The two women sat side by side in silence, the gentle sounds of water and evening birds surrounding them. Without words, a new understanding passed between them, a shared recognition of the journey they had traveled and the love that still bound them. Their hearts, once filled with rivalry and sorrow, were opening to forgiveness and sisterhood. They knew the road ahead would have its challenges, but they were ready to face it together with faith and grace. Jacob returned to the tents as the stars began to twinkle in the deepening sky. He found Leah and Rachel seated quietly outside, their faces softened by the fading light. Approaching gently, he took their hands in his and expressed his gratitude for the peace growing in their hearts. Together they looked up at the heavens, feeling the presence of God watching over them. The night was calm, filled with a sense of hope and renewal. The story of Leah and Rachel teaches us about the power of forgiveness, the courage it takes to let go of hurt, and to open the heart to understanding. It reminds us that love can be complicated, but also healing and transformative. As the family rested beneath the stars, their bonds strengthened by faith and patience, they prepared for the days to come. The journey was far from over, but with each step, they moved closer to harmony and grace. The morning sun rose softly over the hills, casting a warm glow across the tents of Haran. The world awoke to gentle sounds, the chirping of birds, the soft rustle of olive leaves, and the murmurs of children beginning their day. In the household of Laban, life moved forward with steady grace, filled with hope, faith, and quiet blessings. Leah's heart was full as she tended to her children and the daily tasks of the home. Her sons had grown, each one a testament to her prayers and patience. Yet her story was far from complete. With faith held tightly in her heart, Leah awaited the next blessing, trusting in God's perfect timing. Her days were marked by moments of reflection and gratitude. She often sat beneath the wide sky, feeling the presence of God around her like a gentle embrace. In these quiet moments, Leah found strength and peace, knowing that each child was a precious gift and each day a blessing. Rachel, too, walked through her days with a heart full of hope. Though she had Joseph, her beloved son, she continued to pray for more children and for the fullness of family she had longed for. Her faith remained strong, a steady light that guided her through both joy and waiting. Rachel's relationship with Leah had deepened into one of understanding and support. The sisters shared the burdens and blessings of motherhood, finding comfort in their shared faith and hope. Their moments together were filled with gentle kindness, a quiet sisterhood born of love and forgiveness. Jacob's life was busy with the responsibilities of shepherding and family. He worked diligently, caring for the flocks that grazed in the fields and managing the household. His love for Rachel remained deep, yet he had grown to respect Leah's steady strength and kindness. At night, Jacob would sit by the fire and pray for wisdom and peace. He asked God to help him lead his family with fairness and love, to heal any wounds that lingered, and to bless his household with harmony. The flickering flames seemed to echo his hopes, casting a warm light on the path ahead. As the seasons changed, Leah's prayers were answered once more. She gave birth to a new son, whom she named Issachar, meaning reward or hire. His arrival was a source of joy and gratitude, a reminder of God's faithfulness and the blessings that come with patience. Leah cared for Issachar with gentle hands and a tender heart. His presence brought new light to the household, and she found comfort in the growing family that surrounded her. Each child was a sign of hope, a promise that love and faith endure even through trials. Rachel watched with happiness for her sister, yet her own heart still longed. She continued to seek God's guidance and blessing, trusting that the right time would come for her as well. Her faith was unwavering, a quiet strength that carried her through each day. Together, Leah and Rachel nurtured their children and cared for the home. They shared stories of their ancestors, teaching their sons about the promises made to Abraham and the journey that had brought their family to this place. Their faith was a foundation on which their children could grow strong and confident. Jacob's heart was full as he observed his growing family. He loved Rachel deeply, but he also honored Leah's steadfast devotion and the blessings she had brought into his life. He knew the road ahead would have challenges, but he trusted in God's plan and sought to walk with patience and humility. The family gathered often beneath the stars, sharing meals and stories, finding comfort in one another's presence. The children's laughter filled the tents and courtyards, weaving a tapestry of joy and hope. One evening, Leah sat outside her tent, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted with soft hues of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of evening. She felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude, knowing that God's blessings had been many. Leah whispered a prayer of thanks and hope. She asked God to continue to guide her family, to bless her children, and to fill her heart with love and patience. In the quiet of the fading day, Leah felt the gentle touch of grace upon her soul. Rachel, nearby, held Joseph close and looked up at the stars. She prayed for strength, faith, and the fulfillment of her hopes. Though her journey was not yet complete, Rachel trusted that God's timing was perfect and that blessings would come. Her love for Jacob and her children was a light that shone brightly, even in the darkest moments. She found comfort in the quiet moments of prayer and the support of her sister. Jacob joined them under the vast sky, his heart filled with gratitude and hope. The family sat together, united by faith and love, ready to face the future with patience and trust. The sun rose slowly over the hills of Haran, casting long golden rays across the fields and tents of Jacob's growing household. The sky was clear, and the air was cool and soft with the smell of grass and morning dew. In the peaceful light of dawn, the family stirred to life. A new day had begun, and with it came fresh blessings and quiet thoughts of what the future might hold. Jacob stepped out of his tent and looked toward the pasture. His flocks were growing strong and healthy, and the rhythm of tending to them gave structure to his days. Though his responsibilities were many, Jacob found joy in his work and pride in how far he had come. He had left his father's house years ago with nothing but a blessing and a promise, and now he had a family, a home, and the beginnings of great abundance. He walked slowly through the fields, letting his thoughts settle. As the sheep moved lazily through the grass and the sun warmed the earth, Jacob prayed silently for guidance, for peace in his household, and for continued favor upon the women and children he loved. Back at the camp, Leah was busy with the morning's tasks. The younger children were hungry, and the older ones were helping to gather water and grind grain. Leah moved calmly through it all, her heart both steady and full. Her sons were growing fast. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun were no longer little boys. They were strong and helpful, already learning how to tend to animals, repair tools, and speak with the wisdom of men. Each time Leah looked at them, she felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. They were her life's blessing, the answer to the many prayers she had whispered into the night. Even though she had once felt unseen, she now felt surrounded by love. Not always the love she first longed for, but a rich and lasting love nonetheless. Her daughter Dinah was a new joy. The only girl among many brothers, Dinah moved with grace and curiosity. Leah often sat with her in the afternoons, teaching her how to weave cloth, how to mix herbs for healing, and how to care for the little ones. These quiet moments between mother and daughter became a treasured part of Leah's day. Rachel, too, found deep joy in motherhood. Joseph was growing fast, his eyes bright with wonder and his voice full of questions. Rachel cherished every moment with him. She watched him closely, amazed by how quickly he learned and how much he reminded her of Jacob. Though Rachel's heart was still open to the hope of more children, she no longer felt the same sharp ache she once did. Her soul had softened and her prayers had deepened. She trusted God more fully now, not just for what might come, but for what already was. She had been blessed, and she knew it. Rachel often sat near the stream with Joseph, pointing out the birds and teaching him the names of trees and stars. She told him the stories of their ancestors, of Abraham, who left his homeland to follow God's call, and of Sarah, who laughed when she was told she would have a child in old age. These stories were her gift to him, a way of passing down the faith that had sustained her. Despite the peace that now lingered in the household, Jacob was aware of the growing tension between himself and Laban. Over the years, Jacob had worked faithfully, and God had blessed him with success. His flocks had multiplied, and his wealth had grown. But Laban's attitude had begun to shift. The kindness that once filled their relationship was now tinged with envy and suspicion. Jacob spoke with Rachel and Leah in the evenings about his concerns. He felt it might soon be time to leave Haran and return to the land of his father. God had promised him a future in Canaan, and Jacob felt that promise pulling at his heart more and more each day. Rachel listened quietly, her gaze steady. She had always known their life in Haran was temporary, but the thought of leaving was not without emotion. She had grown up here. This was her father's land, and the place where she had fallen in love. But her heart was with Jacob and their son, and she trusted him to lead them well. Leah too understood. Her life had been shaped by many changes, and she had learned how to walk forward with faith even when the path was uncertain. She knew that God's promises were sure, and she was ready to follow wherever the journey would lead. One evening, as the sun sank low in the sky and the first stars began to appear, Jacob gathered his family beneath the olive trees. The air was still and warm, and the scent of bread baking drifted from the tents. The children sat quietly, listening, while Jacob spoke of his desire to return home. "I have worked here many years," he said gently, "and God has blessed us richly. But now the time has come to go back to the land of my father, to the place where God first spoke to me in a dream and promised that I would be the father of a great people. I believe that promise still stands, and I believe it is time to take that step." Leah placed her hand on Dinah's shoulder and nodded slowly. "Wherever you go, I will go," she said quietly. "Our home is with you." Rachel took Joseph's hand, and looked into Jacob's eyes. "We trust you," she said. "We will follow where God leads." Jacob's heart was moved by their words. He looked around at the faces of his children, the laughter in their eyes, the strength in their growing frames. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the deep peace of knowing that his family was ready. They were united, not just by blood, but by purpose and faith. The stars shone more brightly overhead as the family sat together in silence. No one rushed to speak. They simply rested in the moment, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the land, the whisper of the breeze, and the nearness of God's presence. Their story was still unfolding, written day by day through faith, love, and the enduring strength of family. Though they would soon leave Haran behind, they carried with them something far greater than land or wealth. They carried the promises of God and the bonds that held them close, even in the face of every trial. Morning light poured gently across the camp, golden and quiet. Birds fluttered through the branches of the trees, and the earth itself seemed to breathe slowly and calmly. Yet beneath the surface of this stillness, something was changing. Jacob, Rachel, and Leah knew their time in Haran was drawing to a close. The conversations held beneath the olive trees had turned into careful planning. Though Jacob had served Laban faithfully for many years, he now felt a deep pull in his heart, a call to return to the land of his fathers, to the place where God had once promised him a great future. Laban, however, had become increasingly difficult. Though he was Rachel and Leah's father, his trust in Jacob had faded, replaced by jealousy of Jacob's success. Each year, as Jacob's flocks grew and his household prospered, Laban's attitude shifted. The warmth that had once existed between them had cooled into silent suspicion. Jacob knew he could not speak openly about his desire to leave. Instead, he prayed for guidance and waited for the right moment. And when God appeared to him in a dream, the message was clear. "Return to the land of your ancestors, and I will be with you," the Lord had said. Jacob awoke with peace in his heart. The time had come. He called Rachel and Leah to meet him in the fields, away from the ears of the camp. The three of them sat among the sheep, surrounded by tall grass swaying in the wind, their children nearby playing in the sunshine. Jacob spoke calmly but with purpose. "You know how I have worked with all my strength for your father," he began. "You know how many times he changed the terms of our agreement. But God has been with me. He has blessed me and protected me. Last night I saw him in a dream. He told me to return to my homeland." Rachel looked at Jacob with quiet certainty. She nodded. "Our father has not treated you fairly," she said softly, "and he no longer sees us as daughters but as strangers. What God has told you to do, you must do. We will go with you." Leah placed her hand over Jacob's. "Yes, we are with you." There was no celebration, no farewells, only a quiet readiness. Jacob waited for the right moment. When Laban left to shear his own sheep far away, Jacob quickly gathered his family and all that belonged to them. The children were gathered, the tents taken down, and the flocks assembled. Rachel walked beside Jacob as the procession moved through the fields, Her hand firmly holding Joseph's, Leah followed with her sons close at her side, her daughter Dinah nestled among the others. The air was filled with the sound of hooves, low voices, and the bleating of sheep. Yet beneath it all was a steady calm, the peace of following God's command. There was only one act that disturbed this peace. Before leaving, Rachel quietly entered her father's tent and took his household idols, small statues kept as symbols of family gods and inheritance. She wrapped them carefully and hid them in her belongings. She said nothing of it to Jacob. Her reasons were her own. Perhaps she feared what would happen if her father pursued them. Perhaps she wanted to keep a piece of her past. Or perhaps she simply did not yet fully understand how to let go of everything that had been. The caravan moved slowly but steadily away from Haran, journeying toward the land that had been promised to Jacob and his descendants. The road was long and the path unknown, but their hearts were full of hope. Leah looked ahead with quiet strength, Rachel with faithful love, and Jacob with the determination of a man following the voice of God. They traveled for 3 days before Laban realized they were gone. When he did, his anger burned. He gathered men and set out quickly, determined to confront Jacob and reclaim what he believed was his. His thoughts were not only on his daughters and grandchildren, but on the loss of wealth and symbols of power. But God came to Laban in a dream, speaking plainly. "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Laban woke with a heart full of fear and restraint. He continued the pursuit, but the words he would speak were not as sharp as they might have been. When he finally reached Jacob's camp, he found a man calm and steadfast, surrounded by his wives, children, and flocks. The meeting between Jacob and Laban was filled with tension, but did not break into conflict. Laban demanded to know why Jacob had left secretly. Jacob answered plainly, "I was afraid you would take your daughters away from me by force. I have worked hard for you these many years, and God has seen my labor. He has blessed me and told me to return home." Then Laban asked the question that troubled him most. "Why did you steal my household gods?" Jacob was surprised. He had no idea that Rachel had taken anything. He spoke with confidence. "If you find them with anyone here, that person shall not live." Laban searched the tents, going from Leah's to Jacob's to the tents of the servants. Finally, he entered Rachel's. She had hidden the idols under the camel's saddle and was sitting on it. She looked at her father and said softly, "Forgive me, Father. I cannot rise before you. The way of women is upon me." Laban believed her and did not find the idols. The moment passed, but the tension remained. Yet rather than fighting, Jacob and Laban agreed to make peace. They gathered stones and created a heap as a witness to their covenant. Jacob offered a sacrifice there, and the 2 men shared a meal. Laban blessed his daughters and grandchildren. Then he returned to his land, and Jacob turned his eyes toward Canaan. That night, as the stars spread across the sky and the camp settled into rest, Rachel sat alone, looking up at the heavens. Her heart was full of emotion. She had left her home, said no farewell to her father, and carried a secret she could not yet explain. But she also felt peace. Beside her, Joseph slept soundly, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Not far away, Leah whispered prayers over her children, her voice quiet but full of strength. Jacob stood watch at the edge of the camp, his heart steady with faith. He knew their journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. They were no longer in the land of waiting. They were walking toward the land of promise. And though the road ahead would not be easy, they would walk it together. The morning sun filtered through the hills, soft and warm, brushing the earth with its golden fingers. The land ahead stretched wide and open, waiting silently as Jacob and his family continued their journey toward Canaan. With each step, the past slipped gently behind them, and the promise of a new life lay quietly ahead. The flocks moved slowly over the uneven ground, guided by the older sons who had grown strong and sure in their roles. Dinah walked beside her mother, her small hands busy gathering wildflowers as they passed. Joseph held tightly to Rachel's hand, asking endless questions about the land they were going to, about what it might look like, and what stories it would hold. Jacob walked with steady purpose. His heart was focused, his mind alert. Though peace had settled between him and Laban, he now faced something more personal and more uncertain: the upcoming reunion with his brother Esau. Many years ago, Jacob had left Canaan in fear. He had tricked Esau out of their father's blessing, and Esau had sworn to kill him. Though time had passed, the memory remained. As they drew nearer to the land of his birth, Jacob could not help but wonder what kind of reception awaited him. One night, after the camp had settled and the stars shimmered in silence, Jacob lay awake beneath the sky. The weight of the past pressed on his chest like a stone. He looked at his family, his wives, his sons, his daughter, and felt both gratitude and worry. He knew he had changed over the years. He had grown into a man of responsibility and faith. But would Esau still see him as the younger brother who had taken what was not his? The next morning, Jacob called his household together. He explained to Rachel and Leah that he would be sending messengers ahead to speak with Esau and announce their return. Leah listened carefully, her eyes filled with concern. Rachel stood close to Jacob, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Do you think he will welcome us?" Rachel asked gently. "I do not know," Jacob replied, "but I must try. God has told me to return, and I will trust him to prepare the way." The messengers were sent with gifts, flocks, and herds, carefully selected to show respect and goodwill. Jacob instructed them to say, "Your servant Jacob is coming. He hopes to find favor in your sight." When the messengers returned, their news stirred Jacob's heart. "Esau is coming to meet you," they said, "and he has 400 men with him." Jacob's breath caught in his throat. 400 men? He feared the worst. Perhaps Esau still carried anger. Perhaps this was not a welcome at all, but a confrontation. That night, Jacob prayed, as he had never prayed before. His voice trembled, and his heart poured out before God. "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac," he whispered, "you told me to return to my homeland, and that you would be with me. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown me. But please, Deliver me from the hand of my brother. I fear he may come to destroy us. You said I would become a great nation. Please keep your promise." Jacob rose the next morning with renewed purpose. He prepared more gifts and sent them ahead in groups, each one with a servant to greet Esau respectfully. He hoped the steady flow of gifts would soften his brother's heart. Then he turned his thoughts to his family. He arranged them with care servants and their children first, then Leah and her sons, and finally Rachel and Joseph at the end. He wanted to protect them, especially Rachel, whom he loved most, and Joseph, the child of his old longing and deep joy. Leah accepted her place without complaint. She understood Jacob's heart and respected his desire to keep Rachel and Joseph safe. Her own sons stood proudly beside her, ready to defend their family if needed. Rachel watched quietly, her eyes full of emotion. Though she trusted Jacob, she could not help but feel the tension in the air. She held Joseph close, whispering prayers over him. As they approached the place where Jacob would finally meet Esau, the landscape changed. The ground was softer, the hills broader, and the air still. Jacob sent his family ahead slowly, stopping himself to pray once more. Night came, and Jacob stayed behind, alone. What happened next was unlike anything he had ever known. In the silence of night, a man appeared mysterious, strong, and unshakable. Jacob found himself wrestling with him, not in anger, but in deep spiritual struggle. The two grappled through the darkness until the first light of dawn appeared. The man touched Jacob's hip, and it was wrenched from its socket. But Jacob held on tightly. "I will not let you go unless you bless me," Jacob said. The man looked at him and asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he replied. Then the man said something Jacob would never forget. "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." And then he blessed him. When Jacob rose in the morning, he limped, but he walked with a new name, Israel, the one who wrestles with God. He had been changed. As he looked out across the horizon, Jacob saw Esau approaching. The moment had come. He quickly arranged his family as he had before. Then he walked ahead of them all, bowing low to the ground, not once but 7 times as he drew near. Esau saw him and ran, not with anger, not with soldiers behind him, but with open arms. Esau embraced Jacob, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. The years melted away in that moment. The wounds of the past were covered by tears of reconciliation. The fear that had gripped Jacob's heart dissolved like mist in the morning light. Behind him, Leah and Rachel watched, hands pressed over their hearts. Leah felt tears gather in her eyes. Rachel gripped Joseph a little tighter, and the children looked on, not fully understanding but sensing that something sacred had just taken place. Peace had come, not just with Laban, but now with Esau. Jacob had obeyed the voice of God, and God, true to his promise, had walked with him every step of the way. That night, as the family camped under the stars once more, Rachel and Leah sat side by side, quietly watching their sons laugh around the fire. "Do you think they'll remember this day?" Rachel asked. Leah smiled. "I hope so," she said. "I hope they always remember that peace is possible, even after many years." And in the silence that followed, the stars seemed to shine just a little brighter over the journey that still lay ahead. The morning after the reunion with Esau, the world seemed gentler. The wind was soft, the sky pale and clear, and the ground beneath their feet felt warm and welcoming. Jacob stood with his family and looked across the land that stretched wide before them, the land of Canaan, the land of his birth, the land of promise. For so many years he had dreamed of this return. Now here he was, no longer a young man fleeing in fear, but a father, a husband, a shepherd, and a man of faith. With Rachel and Leah beside him and his children surrounding him like olive shoots around a strong tree, Jacob felt a deep and peaceful joy. Esau, having embraced his brother, offered to travel together with him. But Jacob, still cautious and thoughtful, kindly declined. His flocks moved slowly, and the children were still young. He needed time. Esau understood and returned to his home in Seir, and Jacob continued toward the land he would soon call his own. Jacob led his family toward a place called Shechem. The land was green, nestled among soft hills and wide fields. There, he bought a piece of land from the sons of Hamor and set up his tents. He built an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which meant God, the God of Israel. It was the first altar he built since returning home, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The days became slower, gentler. After so many years of working under Laban, constantly moving and watching, it was a gift to settle. The children ran freely through the fields. The flocks grazed under the wide sky. The tents were full of life and rhythm. Rachel took pleasure in planting herbs near the tent, in teaching Joseph to read the stars, and in sitting quietly with her thoughts while her son played nearby. She still prayed for another child, though she spoke of it less often now. Her heart was quiet and full of trust. God had remembered her once. She believed he would again, if it was his will. Leah found peace in the familiar. Her hands were always busy making cheese from milk, weaving cloth, preparing meals and tending to her children. Dinah, now growing into a lovely young girl, stayed close to her mother. The bond between them was strong and gentle, like the braid Leah wove into her daughter's hair each morning. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Jacob gathered his family by the altar. The light glowed on their faces, and the air was still. Jacob lifted his voice and gave thanks to God for bringing them home in peace. He spoke softly, yet with strength. "God has watched over us," he said. "He has led us on every road, protected us from every danger, and kept his promise to me. We will honor him here." His sons listened carefully. The younger ones nestled close to their mothers. The older ones nodded, beginning to understand what it meant to belong to something greater than themselves. That night, the stars sparkled clearly in the sky. Rachel lay beside Joseph, who had fallen asleep with his arm around her neck. She kissed his forehead and closed her eyes, her lips forming a silent prayer. Leah, lying in her own tent with her sons nearby, felt a deep comfort in her chest. The years had been hard, but they had also been good. She had known sorrow, but also strength. She had known longing, but also love. Time passed gently in Shechem. Seasons changed, bringing warm sun and cool rains. The flocks multiplied. The children grew. The tents became a place of rest and gathering, filled with songs, stories, and the rhythms of ordinary days. Yet even in peaceful seasons, challenges still came. One day, trouble arrived quietly, as it often does. Dinah, Leah's only daughter, had gone out to visit the women of the land. While she was away, she was taken by Shechem, the son of Hamor, and her innocence was stolen. When Jacob heard the news, his heart sank. He waited for his sons to return from the field before he acted, his sorrow too deep for words. Leah wept softly, holding Dinah in her arms and whispering prayers over her. Rachel stayed close, offering quiet comfort and standing beside her sister with tenderness. Jacob's sons returned full of anger. The offense against their sister filled them with fury. Though Hamor and Shechem came to speak with Jacob and asked for Dinah to be given in marriage, the brothers were not satisfied. They acted deceitfully and with great violence, bringing destruction to the city of Shechem. Jacob grieved again, this time not only for Dinah, but for the anger that had poured out from his sons. He feared what the surrounding peoples might do in response. And so, once more, he gathered his family and prepared to move. God came to Jacob in that moment of fear and sorrow and said, "Go to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar to me, the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Jacob obeyed. He called his family together and told them to put away any foreign gods, to purify themselves, and to prepare for the journey. Rachel quietly removed the idols she had carried for so long. Her heart, once unsure, was now full of belief. She buried the old symbols beneath a tree and walked forward with her son beside her, her steps strong and full of trust. Leah did the same, helping her daughters and sons prepare for the move. She felt a renewed purpose, knowing they were going to a place where Jacob had once met God. She had never been there herself, but she knew it must be sacred. As they traveled, fear surrounded them, yet no one attacked. The hand of God was upon them, and the people of the land were filled with awe. They arrived safely in Bethel, where Jacob built an altar and called it El Bethel, meaning God of the house of God. There they worshipped, and there they remembered. Jacob wept as he prayed. Rachel stood beside him, her hand over Joseph's shoulder. Leah knelt with Dinah and her sons, their voices lifted in praise. And in that moment, the family felt wrapped in peace, not just the peace of rest, but the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. The soft air of Bethel carried the scent of earth and morning dew. Birds stirred in the trees as the sun climbed gently into the sky. In this sacred place, Jacob's family had found shelter once again. There was quiet, there was rest, and there was the constant whisper of the presence of God. Leah moved through her morning chores with calm and focus. The children gathered firewood, watered the animals, and swept the dusty paths between the tents. Dinah helped with the cooking, her hands learning the rhythm of a woman's work. The older boys had grown taller and stronger, and their movements now echoed their father's. Rachel sat near her tent beneath the branches of a tall terebinth tree. Her hands rested on her growing belly, and Joseph leaned into her side. She smiled at him as he pointed toward the sky, asking questions about the stars and the names of the animals. Her heart was full. After so many years of waiting and praying, she was with child again. Her prayers had been answered. Her hope had not been in vain. She felt life moving within her, small and steady, and she knew that God had not forgotten her. Jacob, too, was filled with quiet joy. He spent his mornings in prayer and his afternoons among the flocks, teaching his sons, guiding their hands and shaping their character. Though sorrow had visited them along the way, he now felt that they were exactly where they should be. His heart was settled, and his faith was strong. One night, God appeared to Jacob again. "Your name is Jacob," the voice said, "but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel." And so it was. Jacob, now Israel, received the promise again, the same promise spoken to his grandfather Abraham and to his father Isaac. "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you. Kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I give to you, and I give it to your children after you." Jacob listened with awe. His heart bowed in reverence. He poured oil over the stone pillar he had set up in Bethel, and he called the place the house of God. His journey had not been easy, but God had been with him at every step. Soon after, the time came to leave Bethel. The family packed their tents and supplies once more, and the flocks were gathered. Jacob led them south, continuing his journey through the land that had been promised. Rachel's steps were slower now. Her body, heavy with the child, needed rest. Jacob walked often beside her, keeping watch, helping her onto her camel, and guiding the pace of the caravan with great care. Leah stayed close as well. She helped with the younger children and looked after Rachel whenever she could. Though their lives had once been marked by competition and pain, there was now something gentler between them, an unspoken understanding, a bond forged through time, sorrow, and shared hope. The land stretched quiet and golden before them, dotted with wild fig trees and olive groves. There was peace in the rhythm of their days, and the children grew more joyful with each new step. But as they drew near to a place called Ephrath, Rachel's labor began. The signs came slowly at first, and then with sudden strength. Rachel was helped down from her camel, and a tent was quickly set up for her. Leah rushed to her side, bringing water and cloths, while Jacob stood just outside, pacing and praying. The midwives came quickly. They had traveled with the family for years and knew Rachel's story. They worked quietly, with steady hands and calming voices, speaking to her softly as she cried out in pain. The hours passed. Rachel's voice grew weaker. Leah stayed by her, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering prayers into her ear. Joseph stood outside, his face pale and confused. He did not fully understand, but he knew something was happening, something important, something heavy. As the sun began to lower in the sky, a baby's cry broke the silence. A son, but Rachel was fading. Her strength was nearly gone. The midwives leaned close to her and whispered, "Do not fear, for you have another son." With trembling lips, Rachel whispered the name Benoni, which meant "son of my sorrow," and with that final breath, her eyes closed. The pain of labor had been too much. Rachel passed from this life, her soul gently carried beyond the veil. Jacob entered the tent and knelt beside her. His heart broke silently. He kissed her forehead and whispered her name. Then he looked at the child, the tiny boy wrapped in swaddling cloth, sleeping peacefully beside her. He picked him up in his arms and wept. The tears that fell were not loud but deep, the kind that only come from a love that cannot be measured. He named the boy Benjamin, son of the right hand. Though he had lost Rachel, the love of his life, he would raise her son with care. He would speak her name often, and Benjamin would know the gentle strength of his mother through stories and memory. Rachel was buried on the way to Ephrath, which would later be called Bethlehem. Jacob set up a pillar to mark her grave, a quiet reminder of the woman who had loved deeply, waited patiently, and left the world with one final gift. The pillar stood tall in the wilderness, where wildflowers grew, and the wind whispered through the grass. Joseph stood at the grave and held his brother's hand. Leah placed her arm around Dinah and looked up at the sky. In that moment, the family grieved together, and in that grief, there was also grace. Rachel's death marked a turning point in the story of Jacob's household. The road ahead would be long, filled with challenges, but also with many blessings. And though Rachel was no longer with them, her presence remained in every prayer, every memory, and in the face of the son she had left behind. That night, as the stars appeared over the land of promise, the family rested. The children curled close to their mothers, and Jacob sat quietly with Benjamin in his arms. Leah lay awake beneath the night sky, whispering a prayer for the sister she had once rivaled and later learned to love. And somewhere in the stillness, a soft wind stirred the trees near Rachel's grave, as if heaven itself were keeping watch over them all. The air over Bethlehem was still. Not a harsh stillness, but one that felt soft, like a blanket spread across the earth. The breeze moved gently through the trees, brushing across the stones that marked the place where Rachel had been laid to rest. Her pillar stood quietly, a lasting remembrance of the woman who had journeyed far, loved deeply, and given life even as hers slipped away. Jacob lingered near her grave longer than the others. Each day, as they prepared to continue their journey, he would walk alone to the spot, his footsteps slow, his eyes lowered. He spoke no words aloud, but his heart was filled with prayer words only God could hear. He held Benjamin often, watching the boy's face as if it contained every piece of Rachel he hoped never to forget. Rachel's absence left a silence in the camp. It was not loud or overwhelming, but it was felt in small things, in the way Joseph now looked for comfort in his father's arms, in the way Benjamin cried at night and had to be rocked gently, and in the way Leah watched over both boys as if they were her own. Leah had known sorrow, but Rachel's passing brought a deeper tenderness into her spirit. She remembered the early days of their rivalry, the tears they had both shed, the hopes they had chased, and the prayers they had whispered into the night. She had not always understood Rachel, and there had been bitterness between them. But none of that remained now, only compassion. She stepped into the space Rachel had left behind, not to replace her, but to hold what remained with kindness and strength. She wrapped Benjamin carefully in cloths and carried him close. She sat with Joseph when he was quiet and unsure, and when Jacob looked lost in thought, she sat beside him, not pressing him to speak, but simply letting him know he was not alone. Leah's love was not loud or demanding. It did not seek notice. It flowed gently, like water over stones, wearing away hardness with patience. The family moved on from Bethlehem. The road ahead was long, but the land was beautiful. They passed through hillsides filled with olive trees and valleys that hummed with life. Jacob walked at the front of the caravan, his staff in hand, the sun casting his shadow long before him. Benjamin grew stronger each day. His tiny hands reached out for his brother Joseph, who now walked beside the camel that carried their belongings. Though still a boy, Joseph had begun to carry himself with quiet grace. His eyes were thoughtful, and his voice was soft. Rachel's spirit lived in him. Leah often watched him from a distance, wondering what kind of man he would become. She saw something special in him, something she could not quite name. She prayed over him as she did for all her children, asking God to guide his steps and keep his heart gentle. Jacob eventually brought the family to a place called Migdal Eder, near the Tower of the Flock. There they set up camp and stayed for a time. It was a quiet place, filled with green pastures and still waters, and it gave them room to breathe and remember. Life returned to its rhythm. The children played, the older sons worked the flocks, and the mothers kept the camp running. Leah taught Dinah how to dye wool with berries and herbs. She taught the younger boys how to shape clay jars and how to tell the weather by the clouds. Her hands were always busy, and her heart was always steady. Joseph helped tend the lambs, often with Benjamin strapped to his back in a soft sling. He told his baby brother stories of stars and dreams, of angels and ladders, of their mother's kindness and laughter. The stories brought comfort to them both. One evening, Jacob gathered his sons around the fire. The stars sparkled overhead, and the flames cast long shadows across the ground. His voice was low but strong. "You are the sons of Israel," he said. "Each of you carries a name that will be remembered. From you will come a people, chosen and blessed. But remember this, your strength must come from your faith, and your greatness must be clothed in humility." The boys listened, their faces flickering in the firelight. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and the rest all sat quietly, each one thinking of the road ahead. Leah sat nearby, listening. She did not speak, but her heart swelled with quiet pride. She had borne 6 of those sons. She had raised them with tears and with hope, and now they stood tall, ready to take their place in the story of God's people. But not every moment was free from sorrow. Not long after leaving Migdalida, word reached Jacob that his father Isaac was nearing the end of his life. He had lived long, well beyond 100 years, and now his time had come. Jacob travelled with his sons to Mamre, where Isaac dwelled. It had been many years since he had seen his father. The reunion was gentle, filled with quiet recognition and the tender weight of time. Isaac blessed Jacob and his sons. He spoke of Abraham, of the promise given to their family, and of the faith that had carried him through his own long life. Then, peacefully, Isaac passed away. Jacob and Esau came together once more to bury their father. Side by side, the brothers laid Isaac to rest in the family tomb at Machpelah, the same place where Abraham and Sarah had been buried. The earth was soft, the air still, and for a moment all was quiet. When Jacob returned to camp, the sun was setting low. He stood at the edge of the tents and looked out over his household. He saw Leah tending to Benjamin, her hands slow and careful. He saw Dinah gathering herbs. He saw his sons preparing food and keeping watch. He breathed deeply. This was the life he had built. This was the family God had given him. Through sorrow and joy, through waiting and wandering, he had arrived. He stepped into the camp and kissed Leah on the forehead. She looked up at him with steady eyes and gave a quiet smile. They said nothing. They did not need to. The camp had returned to quiet routine. Days were filled with grazing flocks, laughter of children, weaving of cloth, and the hum of simple conversation. The land was generous and green, and Jacob's family had grown large and full. Joseph, now a young man in his teens, moved with grace through the camp. He was thoughtful, quick with kindness, and curious about everything. His eyes sparkled with intelligence, and his questions never ceased about the stars, the dreams he had at night, and the stories of old that Jacob would tell around the fire. Jacob loved all his sons, but there was something about Joseph that stirred his heart more deeply. He saw in him a reflection of Rachel, the calm manner, the soft voice, and the dreamer's spirit. In Joseph, Jacob found comfort, a living memory of the woman he had once waited for, labored for, and wept for. And so it happened that one morning Jacob called Joseph aside. The sun had just begun to warm the tents, and dew still sparkled on the grass. The older brothers were already out in the fields, herding sheep. Leah and Dinah were preparing grain near the fire. Jacob handed Joseph a gift, a robe, but not just any robe. It was long and flowing, made of the finest wool dyed in brilliant colors. Reds and blues, soft gold, deep greens, it shimmered like the sunrise. Each thread had been chosen with care, each stitch sewn with love. Joseph's eyes widened. "For me?" Jacob nodded. "You are my son, and you are deeply loved." Joseph held the robe to his chest and smiled. It was not the prideful smile of a boy who thought himself above others, but a soft and grateful smile, a quiet joy that filled his soul. Leah watched from a distance as Joseph wrapped the robe around his shoulders. She understood what it meant. She had known Jacob's heart long enough to recognize that the favor he gave Joseph came from a place of longing, from the sorrow of Rachel's absence, and from the beauty of what Joseph had become. But Leah also understood something else. The other sons would see this, and they would not understand. Later that day, Reuben returned from the fields. His arms were scratched from thorns, and his tunic dusty from the dry grass. When he saw Joseph walking toward him in the colorful robe, something in his chest tightened. Simeon, Levi, and Judah soon noticed it too. The robe shimmered like a banner, and in their eyes it whispered of favoritism, of separation, of being chosen. They watched as Joseph walked beside Jacob. They listened as their father told him stories about their forefathers, stories they had not been told with the same tenderness. And slowly, something bitter began to grow in their hearts. Joseph, in his innocence, did not see it. He wore the robe often, and he continued to dream. Night after night, dreams came to him vivid, strange, and full of meaning. In one dream, he and his brothers were in the field binding sheaves of grain. Suddenly, his brother's sheaves bowed down to his. In another dream, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed before him. He woke with wonder in his eyes and rushed to share what he had seen. Leah was nearby when he spoke to his brothers. "Listen," Joseph said excitedly. "I had a dream. We were in the field and your sheaves bowed to mine." The brothers fell silent. Another day he spoke again. "I saw the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing to me." Even Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Shall your mother and I and your brothers truly come to bow down before you?" But he pondered the words in his heart. Joseph meant no harm. His voice was full of innocence. He did not boast. He did not brag. He only spoke what he saw. But his brothers could not hear the dreams without hearing something else behind them. They saw them as pride, as arrogance, as proof that their younger brother thought himself above them. Their anger deepened. Leah noticed the change in her sons. She saw the quiet looks passed among them when Joseph walked by. She heard the way their voices dropped when they spoke of him. Though she loved them all, she began to fear what their bitterness might become. She tried to speak to them gently in the evenings, reminding them of brotherhood and peace. But their hurt hearts had begun to harden. Joseph, meanwhile, continued to grow in wisdom and favor. He often helped Leah with her work, carrying baskets of figs, filling jars with water, and helping the younger children learn their prayers. She loved him like one of her own and began to pray over him just as she did her sons, perhaps even more. One morning, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were tending flocks near Shechem. He wrapped the robe around him and gave him instructions. "Go now. See if all is well with your brothers and the flocks. Then return to me with news." Joseph obeyed. He walked through the hills and valleys, the robe swaying with each step, the sun catching its colors and setting them aflame. He searched until he found a man who directed him to Dothan, where his brothers had moved the flocks. And there, in the distance, his brothers saw him coming. They recognized him immediately by the coat. The colors shimmered like a flame in the sunday, and the old bitterness inside them flared. "Here comes the dreamer," one of them said. "Let us kill him," another whispered. "Then we shall see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben, the eldest, spoke up. "Do not take his life. Let us throw him into this pit in the wilderness. Do not lay a hand on him." His voice was urgent but hidden beneath calmness. His plan was to rescue Joseph later and bring him back safely to their father. And so, when Joseph arrived, smiling, eager to greet them, they grabbed him. They tore the robe from his body, the beloved coat, the one sewn with care. They cast him into an empty pit, a dark hole in the ground with no water. And then they sat and ate. Far from home, Joseph lay in the pit. The sky above was only a narrow sliver. The voices of his brothers echoed above him. He did not cry out. He did not curse. He waited. Back in camp, Leah felt uneasy. Something stirred in her spirit. She looked around for Joseph and did not find him. And that night, as the fire burned low and the stars stretched silently overhead, she whispered a prayer without knowing exactly why. "Lord, protect him. Keep him in your hands." And in the shadows of that prayer, a journey far greater than anyone could imagine was beginning. The wind in Dothan was dry and restless, sweeping across the low hills and whispering through the shrubs. The brothers sat around a small fire, their meal spread before them, but their hearts were not at peace. They had thrown their own brother into a pit, and though his cries had stopped, the memory of his voice lingered in the still air. Reuben walked away for a while, unable to sit with the others. His heart was heavy with guilt. He had intended to return secretly, to lift Joseph from the pit and send him safely back to their father. But the hours slipped by, and before he could act, something happened that none of them expected. A caravan of traders approached, moving slowly across the dusty plain. Their camels were laden with goods, spices, balm and myrrh. They were heading toward Egypt. Judah, watching them come, spoke quietly to the others. "What profit is there if we kill our brother and cover it up? Let us sell him to these traders. He is our flesh and blood, but he will be gone, and our hands will be clean." The brothers listened, and they agreed. When the traders came near, the brothers waved them down and brought Joseph up from the pit. His robe was gone, his face dusty, his eyes quiet but unbroken. They handed him over for 20 pieces of silver. The traders led him away, the ropes loose but real. Joseph did not resist. He turned once to look back at his brothers. His eyes searched for someone, maybe Reuben, maybe anyone. But no one stepped forward. Reuben returned to the pit a short while later and found it empty. His heart dropped. He tore his garments and cried out, "The boy is gone. What will I do now?" He returned to his brothers, his face pale. They said nothing. The decision had been made. The deed was done. Now came the part that would wound their father more than any sword could. They took Joseph's robe, the beautiful garment, woven by Jacob's hands, and dipped it into the blood of a young goat they had killed. The colors were still bright, but now they were stained. The threads were torn. The beauty was broken. They carried the robe back to Jacob. When he saw it, his hands trembled. He took the robe in his arms, pressed it to his face, and wept. "It is my son's robe," he said. "A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Jacob fell to the ground in mourning. He tore his garments and wore sackcloth. His grief was deep and wild. No one could comfort him. "I will go down to the grave in sorrow," he cried. "I will mourn for my son until I see him no more." Leah stood beside the tent and watched. She said nothing. Her heart was full of pain not only for Joseph, but for the lies wrapped around the boy's name. She looked at her sons and they looked away. She took Benjamin in her arms and held him close. Rachel's son, the last piece of her sister. She knew now she must protect him. The days passed slowly. The camp, once filled with laughter and daily rhythm, grew quieter. The fire still burned each night, but the stories were fewer. Jacob sat often in silence, staring at the stars. The joy that had once danced in his eyes had dimmed. He still led the family, still guided the flocks, but a part of him was missing. Joseph, gone. Rachel had been taken from him in childbirth. And now Joseph too was gone. It was as if the light that came from her had vanished from his life completely. Only Benjamin remained, Zerajah, and Jacob clung to him like a branch in a storm. Leah watched over the camp as she always had. She kept the tents in order. She baked the bread. She guided Dinah softly to the younger boys and prayed with the older ones. But a quiet sorrow had settled over her as well. Also, she missed Joseph. She missed his voice, his questions, his stories, the sows, and she mourned the silence between herself and her sons, soft parts. She had given them life. She had nursed them, rocked them, taught them. But now they carried a secret she could not change. They had harmed their brother, and though they never spoke of it, she saw it in their eyes. The guilt, the regret, the fear. Laugh. She prayed that time would soften them. She prayed that God, who sees all things, would protect Joseph wherever he was. The soft parts. Far away, Joseph was led down the long road to Egypt. The land changed around him. The trees became palms. The wind carried a different scent of sand and salt and Sunday. The cities were larger. The people wore strange clothes and spoke a language he did not know. Joseph watched. He listened. He remembered everything. Sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. His life as a son was over. Now he was a servant. Alas, yet he did not forget his dreams. Zamella. And God did not forget him. Back in Canaan, Leah looked after Benjamin as if he were her own. Sate. She wove a new robe for him, not as grand or as bright as the one Joseph had worn, but soft and warm, stitched with care. She taught him songs. She told him stories of Rachel, not in sadness, but with quiet reverence. "You were born from love," she would say. "Your mother was kind and brave, and your brother Joseph, he was full of light." Benjamin listened, wide-eyed. He did not understand everything, but he held on to her words like treasures. Years would pass. The grief would remain in Jacob's eyes, but his family would grow. The sons would marry, and children would run through the camp once again. Leah, growing older, walked slowly now, but her heart remained steady. Solomon. She had lived through rejection, through rivalry, through sorrow. She had also lived through healing, through peace, through the quiet work of love. And each evening, as she lit the lamp in her tent and watched the sun slip below the hills, she whispered the same prayer. Keep them, Lord, all of them. Keep them in your hands. And the light glowed softly into the night. The years passed slowly, like a river winding through a quiet valley. Time softened the sharp edges of sorrow, but did not erase the loss. Jacob still carried grief in his heart, and though the weight grew lighter with each season, it never left him completely. All in the camp, life continued. All the sons of Jacob became men, and their children ran through the fields and along the dusty paths, their laughter rising like songbirds in the morning. All the herds multiplied, the flocks flourished, and the tents spread farther across the land. Leah moved more slowly now. Her hair had grown silver in places, and her hands bore the marks of years of weaving, gathering, and working in the Sunday. Yet her spirit was calm, and her presence was a gentle anchor in the family. Also, she still cared for Benjamin as a mother would, though he was now taller and stronger, his voice deeper, his eyes quiet and observant. There was a calmness in him, a gentleness that reminded Leah so much of Rachel that it often made her heart ache. He listened carefully when she spoke, and he never tired of her stories about the past. Sometimes, at twilight, Benjamin would sit beside Leah as she stirred the fire, and he would ask questions about Rachel, about Joseph, about the days when the family lived under the watchful sky of Paddan Aram. Leah, with her hands in her lap and her voice low, would speak ill of anyone. She did not speak ill of anyone. She did not speak of betrayal or anger. She spoke of love, of hope, of the way God had always watched over them, even in the hardest moments. Joseph. She told Benjamin how Joseph had been a boy full of dreams, and how Rachel had loved both her sons with a fierce and tender heart. When she was finished speaking, she would look into the fire and whisper a prayer. Lord, wherever Joseph is, if he still lives, cover him in your mercy. And if you have taken him, hold him close. We leave him in your hands. Land far away. The boy Leah prayed for had become a man. Joseph's days in Egypt were not easy, but they were shaped by the quiet guidance of God. He had been taken from his family, he had not been taken from the Lord. In the house of Potiphar, he worked with excellence and grace. Everything he touched prospered. He was a servant, he was respected, trusted, and placed over the affairs of the household. He spoke with kindness. He walked with wisdom. The pain of the past had not turned his heart bitter. Trials came, as they always do. Joseph was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison. The walls were cold, the days long. Yet even in prison, Joseph found favor. He cared for others. He listened to dreams. He waited, not just for freedom, but for God. Meanwhile, in Canaan, a strange unease settled over the land. The skies grew pale. The winds shifted. The rain became less frequent. The earth cracked beneath dry roots, and the streams ran low. Famine had begun. First, the family of Jacob managed well. Their stores were full, their flocks strong. But as the months passed, food became scarce. The wells grew shallow. The children asked for bread, and the mothers had little to give. Jacob, now an old man, watched the land with concern. His sons looked to him for guidance, and he made a decision. "I have heard," he said, "that there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy some, so that we may live and not die." So 10 of his sons set out, leaving Benjamin behind. Jacob would not risk him, not after losing Joseph. Benjamin was the last son of Rachel, and Jacob's heart could not bear another loss. The journey to Egypt was long, but the brothers traveled with purpose. When they arrived, they were led to the one who oversaw the grain, a governor, a powerful man robed in fine linen, with eyes that saw more than they revealed. They bowed low before him, not knowing they bowed before their own brother. Joseph recognized them. They did not know him. One was the boy in the colored robe. Before them stood a ruler, a man of wisdom and strength. Joseph spoke to them through an interpreter. He questioned them sharply. He accused them of being spies. Although his words were stern, his heart was torn. He remembered each face. He heard the echoes of their voices from years ago. The pain, the pit, the silence. He held back his tears. For now. Back in Canaan, Leah sat beneath the tree near her tent, weaving quietly as the sun faded. Benjamin sat beside her, his hands wrapped around a clay cup of cool water. "Do you think they will return soon?" he asked. Leah looked toward the road, her fingers still moving across the thread. "They will return," she said softly. "God does not forget his children." Benjamin looked at her face and saw something peaceful there, a kind of strength that had taken years to form, strength that had come from waiting, from walking through sorrow and joy, from learning to trust even when the path was hidden. Pull them off. He reached for her hand, and she smiled. "You are growing into a fine young man," she said. "And whatever comes, never forget this. God sees what others do not. He remembers, he restores, even when we cannot see the end." The road between Canaan and Egypt had grown thin with dust, but something sacred was unfolding. Dreams long buried were rising again. Secrets long hidden were beginning to stir, and in the tents of Jacob, beneath the watchful eyes of Leah, the family waited, not knowing that the story was nearing its most beautiful turn. A story of forgiveness, a story of reunion, a story of God's quiet faithfulness that never, ever sleeps. The sun had risen quietly over the hills of Canaan. Morning dew clung to the grass, and the wind moved gently through the camp. But the peaceful air could not hide the growing tension among Jacob's family. The brothers who had journeyed to Egypt had returned with food, yes, but also with confusion, fear, and one missing brother. Simeon had been left behind, and the man who ruled over Egypt, the man who had sold them the grain, had spoken firmly. If they wished to see Simeon again, they must return with their youngest brother. With Benjamin, Jacob's heart grew heavy. He had already lost Joseph. Now, Simeon was gone, and they were asking him to send Benjamin away as well. "I cannot," Jacob said again and again. "My son shall not go with you. His brother is dead. He alone remains. If harm were to come to him on the journey, you would bring my grey head down to the grave in sorrow." Leah listened quietly. She sat in her place near the cooking fire, her hands steady but her thoughts far away. She watched Benjamin walk slowly around the camp, silent and thoughtful. He heard the whispers, he felt the worry, and though no one told him directly, he knew that he was at the center of it all. At night, Leah prayed for him. She asked God to protect the boy, to give Jacob wisdom, and to guide the brothers who carried so many burdens in their hearts. Days passed. The grain from Egypt began to run low, and hunger returned. The brothers gathered around their father once more. This time, Judah stepped forward. "Send the boy with me," he said softly. "I myself will be his guarantee. You may hold me accountable. If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame all my life." Jacob sat in silence. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for Benjamin, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. He looked into his eyes and saw Rachel again, not in face or form, but in spirit, a quiet grace, a strength that did not boast, a kindness that asked for nothing. And slowly, with sorrow in his voice, Jacob gave his answer. "If it must be so, then do this. Take gifts for the man in Egypt, a little balm, a little honey, spices, and myrrh. Take double the silver, and take Benjamin. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will release your other brother and Benjamin too." Leah stood quietly as they prepared for the journey. She packed extra food in the baskets and tied fresh cloth around Benjamin's shoulders. She placed her hands on his head and whispered a blessing. "Be strong, my son. Be kind, and listen to the voice of God." Benjamin did not speak, but he nodded. Then he turned and followed his brothers down the road that led once more to Egypt. Leah stood at the edge of the camp until they were out of sight. Her eyes did not leave the horizon, even as the wind tugged at her veil and the sunlight fell across her face. She knew that something was shifting. She could not name it, but she felt it, deep within. In Egypt, Joseph waited. He stood at the high window of his house, looking down at the roads that led to the city gates. His heart was steady, but his thoughts raced. Each day he wondered, would they return? Would they bring Benjamin? Would he see his brother again? Then one morning, word came. "They have arrived." Joseph hurried to the gates and saw them. The same faces, older now, weathered by time and travel, and among them one he had never truly known. Benjamin, the child born after he was taken, the son of his mother. Joseph's heart swelled. He held back his tears and instructed his servant to prepare a feast. "Bring them to my house," he said. "They will dine with me at noon." The brothers were afraid. They did not understand why they had been brought to the ruler's home. They feared they were being accused, trapped, but the servant reassured them. "Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your payment." Then he brought Simeon out to them. There was relief, and there was still confusion. Soon they were led into the house. Water was brought for their feet. Food was prepared for their animals. And when Joseph entered the room, they bowed down before him again, just as in his dreams. Joseph looked at Benjamin. "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" he asked. Then, Unable to hide his emotion, he stepped away. He went into a private room and wept. His shoulders shook with the weight of the years, the longing, the questions, the grief. He had waited so long for this moment, and now here it was, filled with joy and pain all at once. He washed his face and returned, composed. The meal was served. They ate together, the brothers sitting in order from oldest to youngest, though none had told Joseph their birth order. Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than the others, and yet no one protested. There was a stillness in the room, a hush, as if the winds of God were blowing softly through the house. That night, Joseph made one more plan. He ordered his steward to fill their sacks with grain. He told him to return each man's silver, and then he gave one final instruction. Place my silver cup, the special one, in the sack of the youngest. It was not done to trap them with punishment. It was done to test something else, to test their hearts, to see if they had changed, to see if they would abandon Benjamin as they once abandoned him. In the early morning light, the brothers set out for home. Their animals were heavy with grain, and their hearts were full of relief. But before they reached the gates, the steward overtook them. He searched their sacks, and he found the cup in Benjamin's bag. The brothers tore their clothes in despair. They returned to Joseph's house, not in anger, but in sorrow. They fell before him. Judah stepped forward, and in a voice filled with humility and courage, he offered himself in place of the boy. "Take me instead," he said. "Let the boy return to his father. He cannot bear to lose him." And in that moment, Joseph knew. They were not the same men. Something had changed, and his heart, so long held in silence, broke wide open.